Welcome to Rider Nation Station, presented by American Manufacturing Solutions, your total logistics partner, investing in Rider Nation Station and St. Mary's, Ohio, and to our other fine sponsors. One of my favorite songs is Bob Seger's Down on Main Street. My favorite lines in the 1981 tune are, "Sometimes, even now, when I'm feeling lonely and beat, I drift back in time and I find my feet down on Main Street." Today we're here to discuss our Main Street, Spring Street, a main street that runs through St. Mary's, Ohio, that has two curves in it. The curves have remained, but most of the business owners and patrons have changed. To provide us with his drifting back in time of life growing up on Spring Street is Mr. John Andreoni. To me, Mr. Andreoni is a Renaissance man. He can, he has, and he does do it all. He has taught in our school system for 30 plus years. He is a published writer, including Reader's Digest and Bassmaster magazine. He is an avid outdoorsman. He is a bridge player. He's a great cook of game birds. He is a gifted pianist, and he is a Vietnam veteran, serving as a medic. Mr. A, as many students called him, was a loving husband and is a wonderful father to his 3 children. Thank you for being here with us today, and I'm excited to learn about what Spring Street used to be and what the similarities and contrasts are today. First, let's get started with a little background info on the Andreoni family. When and how did the Andreoni family come to St. Mary's, Ohio?
Actually, the business that we had in town started in the early 1900s, like about 1903. And my grandparents started that business. Both of them were immigrants from Italy, and they wound up in Lima. My grandfather working in the wholesale fruit industry in Lima, and eventually moved to St. Mary's and started a similar business along with a confectionery, and then married my grandmother, who also came over with her sister after most of the family was killed in an accident, a family industry accident. So they were over here, and that's where that business started, and where my father was born above that store, and all of my aunts and uncles were born above the store in the apartment where we lived.
So you're talking the store was a confectionery?
It was a confectionery, and they dealt in the wholesale fruit market. They supplied fruit to the area on the wholesale fruit part. So they would bring in fruit in large quantities, stored in the basement, and then deliver it to different communities on a wholesale basis, just like the business was run in Lima, but on a smaller scale.
So were there sweets that were involved with this store?
Yeah, there were candies and stuff, but the wholesale fruit part was, a major part of it.
That was the driver of
That was the driver of it, and then initially it expanded into the confectionery where there was candy, and then we started making homemade candy and homemade ice cream and things like that, and it became like there were booths in there, and we had a soda fountain and all the rest, and it was a hangout for kids of the ages, and the town was busy, so there was always traffic going through the place.
And we're talking, this was located on East Spring Street. We're shooting this from 215 East Spring Street, and as we look out, Spring Street's right ahead of us. So to the east on
229 East Spring Street.
229 East Spring Street, and it's home right now to a tattoo parlor.
I think there's a tattoo parlor there.
Okay, and so the store was there, and then you lived
there was a large apartment. There's 2 apartments above it now, but there was one large apartment above that whole length of that building, and that's where I grew up.
Okay, so the business is fruits. It's got some sweets. It's got. Were you a soda jerk?
I was, yes. Oh yes, I was a soda jerk, and we were famous for some of our what they call the burnt peanuts, and I was the one that eventually learned how to do the peanuts and roast the peanuts, and yeah, we all did that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So, was there any thought process or encouragement from your father who took this over from his grandfather, I presume,
To
for
do-
John Andreoni
to
to
do
take
the
this
bus-
over.
to do the business. The business really couldn't survive with the new supermarkets that came in and so forth and so on, and the amount of traffic. As a matter of fact, the business was kept open for my grandmother for the longest time, and she kept that thing open until she was 90.
Oh my!
And would keep that store from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, every day, 7 days a week. That's where she was, in the store. And I can remember toward the end of the store that gross revenue would run sometimes maybe $2.50 or $3 a day.
Yeah.
That's basically what. But when we were doing the milk and the fruits and the stuff, it was enough to go ahead and keep us clothed and so forth. And then my dad did work in factories later on during the war, and later on to put the kids through school and so forth. But
So to put into perspective for me, $2.50 gross. What would something cost, a drink that a kid would come in to get? Is it
you buy a bottle of pop for a nickel.
Okay.
You buy a pack of cigarettes for 20 cents. You buy a pint of ice cream for 20 cents.
Okay.
Unless it was homemade, and then it went to 40 cents. And that's because it was very expensive to do the cream, just to make and everything.
Yep.
But yeah, I can remember the cigarette sale. We did sell cigarettes, and it was 14 cents for regulars and 20 cents for, what do you call them, the long, the king size. That's what it was, king size, yeah. So.
Now, did you have to card back then, or if kids came in?
Card. No.
I'll take that as a no.
You can take that as a no, because kids, it was a thing to do. Smoking back at that point in time, I don't think there was any kid 12 years old that hadn't smoked a cigarette or part of one.
Now, from the movies, I always remember they rolled them up in the sleeve. Was that a real legit thing, or is that just a Hollywood?
Not at that time. Of course, we didn't. When I was in high school, I did, though. However,
yeah.
Later on, yeah, that was a thing to do. They were all, that was yes.
Okay.
We'll just let that go.
We'll let that go.
We'll let that go. Yeah.
So, give me a couple benefits of living above a confectionery, and then a couple disadvantages of living above a confectionery.
I didn't know of any disadvantages. Everything was fine. I mean, you had the store. You didn't go down and constantly eat candy and ice cream and so forth. But it was there if you wanted it, and which was fine. I did hit the peanuts pretty hard. I did like the peanuts. Out the backside.
They call that quality control.
That was quality control, yeah. And then out the backside of the place was the canal, where the parking lot is. Behind was all open water, and we lived down there and played down there and played in the park, and we just took care of our own entertainment, and it was a great lifestyle.
So as we know it today, it's all parking lot. So how far was the canal from the backside of the store?
I would say probably 100 feet, maybe, from the back of the store over. And the stores originally were warehouse buildings. And if you look at the back of the buildings now, you can see where the block and tackle were, because they were built to face the canal. Mm-hmm. That's originally how that was. And they're frame buildings. There's spaces between them, and it's amazing that they're standing, because it's just an interesting thing that they're still around.
So, to me, I've always lived in the country. Not having the backyard and the picket fence is a little bit of a foreign concept for me. So, what was your playground then as a kid growing up?
My playground was right out the back door. I lived on the canal.
Swam there?
Swam there, fished there, and and I fished like 250 days a year. Whenever it was open, we fished. And the family fished. everybody fished because we ate the fish out of the canal.
So as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid fishing in the canal, was it good fishing at that time?
Bullheads, that's what you caught. It's a relative thing. You know, there were no trout in the canal, but nice bullheads were good eating. So yeah.
All right. What about Memorial Park? Was that part of the playground for you, or no?
That was across there was a playground where the library stands.
Okay.
That's where the park was, with the slide and the swings and the whatnot. Across the street was the Memorial Park that had the fountain where the bell tower stands, and then there was still at that stage the memorial board that had all the names. I think it was from the First World War.
Yep.
Yeah, and I can remember that. And the pond, the fountain.
Yeah.
Was there. The lower level where the canal boat was there, and so that was our playground.
So let's go back to that park where the present-day library is. Is that where that slide that looks like it was 30 feet tall?
It was a metal slide, and it was slick, and the rite of passage was on a piece of wax paper. And don't try to slow down. And you did it once, and that was it.
So the 1936 film of St. Mary's captures that slide. And I'll tell you what, it looks pretty scary to climb up that.
Yeah, we were doing it at 5, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and it was scary, but you could put your feet on the side, and that was fine. But again, my sister's the one that initiated me to the wax paper. You can do this, and it was like, yeah. Okay.
And it was well worth it.
No, it was not well worth it. Yes, it really picked up speed. Quality stuff. It was well constructed. There was monkey bars. There was monkey bars toward the back, and then and there was enough room for a ball diamond for a small pickup games, and we played baseball there all the time.
Was there a creamery located across?
Yeah. Across,
because I remember that from watching the 36 film.
It's the Union Hall.
Where the Union Hall is today.
It was the White Mountain Creamery.
And in that film, the 36 film, they're actually showing a little bit of ball game going on.
In that park.
In that park, yep.
Yeah, it was the bigger kids, would hit a baseball pretty far, but with the equipment that we had, it was a baseball had to last, so it was friction,
right.
A lot of friction tape on that baseball by the time.
Couldn't hit it to the canal, could you?
You didn't hit you hit toward Chestnut Street.
Towards Chestnut Street.
You hit toward Chestnut Street.
Okay.
And baseball bats we would pick up that were broken bats, nail them up, glue them up, tape them up. That's, back in the day it wasn't very technical. We had it good. We made our own things.
And it wasn't the throwaway society that maybe we witnessed today.
No, you didn't throw anything away, not at all. Everything was a lot of kids ran with my bunch that we ran. We went around house to house and collected newspapers and scrap metal and whatnot, and would take it over to the junkyards. There was one on the west side of town where Acme Metal was at one time, and then there was the one across the street across from where the creamery was, and you could take a day and you get $1 and split that 4 ways. You were in the buckwheat. That was kind of
get some ice cream.
You could get a lot of things for a quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, quarter was big money.
So. What were other play areas for you? Did you have boundaries? Were you able to go to Armstrong Park or down to Cook's Cove?
It depended on how old you were. The older you got, the more
freedom.
The more freedom you got. I don't think at 9 years old I crossed South Street to go to the canal that way. Maybe at 10 or 11, but at 9 years old, I was pretty much within whistle distance of my mother.
And you knew the whistle, and that meant
I hear the whistle, you come home. But other than that, it was when the lights came on.
Okay.
Street lights came home, you were home. and that was about the size of it. And there were things that we did that today's kids would never be allowed, or you'd be in trouble or whatever. So every kid at my age had a knife, had a pocket knife. We had the most realistic looking cap guns that were ever made. You could go down to the 5 and dime store, that Morris's 5 and dime, and pick a pocket knife up for 15 cents or a switchblade for a quarter. Literally a push button switchblade knife. And so, yeah, we had no limits to what we did. It was, and nobody seemed to get hurt. I mean, it was just like we did crazy things, and it just was what it was.
Yep.
We didn't know any better.
And as you got older, did you spend much time at Grand Lake St. Mary's?
Yeah. As I got older, and as younger, that's where we had our outings. Mm-hmm. If we went to an outing, there were no vacations for most people. We didn't. There was one car. You didn't travel. Probably made it to Russell's Point one time a year, maybe that way.
To the amusement park.
To the amusement park, yeah, do that, and you would make it over to Salina at Edgewater. There was a merry-go-round and certain things, and you picnicked at the park at the lake and swam in the lake most of the summer until it got hot. Then it was still polio time back then.
Right.
You didn't go in the water because you catch polio from them.
That's what the thought process was.
That was one of the process. Well, one of the ideas, and because I can't remember when the vaccines came in, but polio was prevalent in 50.
Yep.
I still think so. That's. But yeah, I think we were healthier because we were exposed to so much. I mean, no germ would dare attack us, I guess is the way. You played in the dirt. You played.
You were just active.
You played in the dirt, and you fished, and you ate a sandwich, and it all.
You didn't go wash your hands first.
No,
probably.
no, not at all. It was a good time. I can, and we gathered our own fish bait, and you'd hunt night crawlers at night, and occasionally Fortman Meat Market would slaughter some chickens, and they'd throw all of the entrails on a big pile out of the. And of course, that was heyday time. Had to get out of those. You could go to the meat market and get liver free. He'd give you some liver to go fish. It was just a different era. It was nice.
So, friends, were there a lot of kids your age that were living on Spring Street as well?
No, not really. Your friends were limited. Your school friends, no, you just made whoever round up at the park.
Okay.
Wherever the East Side School, we played. Softball played over there. The
East Side School at that time was located where the Eagles is nowadays?
Eagles is, yeah.
Okay.
And their playground in the back end was gravel, and we played softball back there.
Okay.
And it was home run ball. I mean, the older you got, the easier it was to hit over the fence.
Yeah.
And when you got too old, then it was an out. But when you were young, it was a big thing at that time. But you really can look. You look at that time, and you didn't have a lot. You didn't know any better, and not having a lot meaning you were creative and you did your own thing, and you could learn. You made things. You could go to the lumber yard up the street and go through and pick out wood scraps, and they'd give you. They had the state barns that were back there, where there were a couple of state barns. Excuse me, and the guy who ran that would let us kids in there and give us bolts and nails and washers and do stuff for us to help us build go-karts and whatever we wanted to do. So we had that. I mean, it was just a nice.
Reminds me a little bit of watching some old our gang TV shows.
Yes, that's just about, yes, quite similar. Just in looking back at it, I'd do it again in a minute compared to what goes on today.
So let's talk about that real quickly. What would you tell youth of today that they should experience of your youth, or do things differently?
I don't think you could tell youth of the day.
Okay.
You know, they would probably feel sorry for you. And you know, but with
because you didn't have things that they have.
No. I think we got our first television set in 1950. One of the first ones. Other than that, we watched television in the storefronts. That was the thing to do, and there was no TV. I mean, we even watched test patterns. With nothing, you know, the test pattern. Yeah, we're going to shut it off. We're going to watch the test pattern.
Are you talking the color bars?
I'm talking the Indian chief head.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we like that. I like that. It's okay. But these kids, I don't think kids today could understand radio theater at all. Because radio theater allowed you to, your imagination went and you made your own pictures in your head, and it was just as realistic as, and it was better because I made it to my specifications.
Right.
So yeah.
I think what's interesting, before we went on, you're talking about some of the different radio shows, and the show, which I can't remember right now, that you fell in love with one of the characters. You'd never seen her in your life.
Sky King.
There we go.
Well, yes, I did see her.
In your mind.
In my mind, yes.
So that was some good writing, and
that was
over the airwaves.
or an imaginative brain, which you were really you had to have, which you did a lot of imagination stuff, because we did, today. I mean, I can imagine that when we were kids, we would try to make a radio or try to make a walkie-talkie, and we'd make a fancy-looking walkie-talkie with a can and a string in it, and and it worked. But today, I think the kid would get his smartphone out and text you. Well, that didn't work that way.
Yeah.
But it was just a very laid-back, easy, low stress, at least for it was very comfortable, very non-threatening, and you worried about nothing. It was just never any, that wasn't a concern. So.
Well, you've got me convinced to go back. I just can't figure out a way to do it.
I can't figure out a way to do it either. Maybe when I get older, it'll happen.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe then it might happen.
All righty, we're going to take a short break to thank our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little more about the stores on Spring Street and what you remember about Spring Street on Friday and Saturday nights, and a little bit more. So we'll be right back after we thank our sponsors.
This segment of tonight's broadcast has been brought to you by Minster Bank, helping people achieve financial success in support of the Rider Nation and the St. Mary's community. The Evening Leader, chronicling the history of St. Mary's for over 100 years. And like a good neighbor, Lori Yelton, your local State Farm agent, is there.
Welcome back, and now we're going to do our This Day in History, brought to you by our fine sponsors. Please stop in to see these fine folks and stay local the best you can. Tell them thanks for supporting Rider Nation Station. The day that we're going to look at is April 15th, 1950. April 16th, 1950 apparently was a Sunday, so we've got to go back a day. And then the Evening Leader. Trustees of Hospital District plan to employ consultant for aid in selecting plans. Doctors and nurses were asked to send in their suggestions regarding the building plans. Nurses and doctors are largely in favor of the multi-story plans. They also wish toilets to be installed between every 2 rooms. If they only knew today, that wouldn't work. Yeah. West Auglaize Chapter Red Cross collects 80% of goal in its annual fund drive. To date, the campaign has brought in a total of $6,310.83. Only 2 districts in the chapter met their quota, St. Mary's Township and the village of New Knoxville. Playing at the Shakers Theater, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, with 4 riotous days is Francis the Talking Mule. Remember that movie at all?
This was a Saturday. This was on, yes, I remember the movie.
I remember watching it on...
But that was the feature, the nighttime
Yeah.
feature, not during the day.
Yep.
Yep, that's right.
I remember watching it on Channel 55 out in the country. They would always show the old black and whites, and I got a kick out of Francis the Talking Mule. And then, from the Live Wire, Memorial High School's newspaper within the Evening Leader. And I think you told me the other day that there was actually an office above for the students.
That was when I was teaching.
Okay.
That was done in the high school, and of course, it was typeset by the paper. But Emil Steva was the one who did the Live Wire, and then it was set over there at the Leader with the typesetting with the lead thing. Later on, yeah, it was there.
I think a pretty neat idea that they had their own dedicated page within the Evening Leader.
Yes, absolutely.
And so out of the Live Wire, April 15th, 1950, University of Michigan professor Hussey gives interesting presentation at high school assembly. With the help of many colored slides, the professor presented pictures of reptiles that roamed the earth as far back as 150 million years ago. The Live Wire co-editor, Doris Shivington, wrote praise to the Y-Teens for their inspirational Holy Week services. She wrote, "They were a great help to many of us, inspirationally and in attracting our attention to the significance of Easter." 1950. And under the personal section, which was a little bit reflective to me of like a Facebook posting, Saturday night, Helen Beckett, our aunt, Rich and I's aunt, had a surprise birthday party for David Donneberg. All attendees had a very enjoyable time. So there we have it, this day in history, April 15th, 1950. Again, thanks to the following sponsors for helping to bring this day in history: Laura Yelton State Farm, Mr. Bank, and of course, the Evening Leader. Let's get back to talking about Spring Street. Reminisce. Walk us down and back Spring Street. Some of your favorite stores.
Well, living at the store, at that period of time, across the street was Donathan Drugstore, and later it became Hainline's Drugstore. And when Old Man Donathan was in there, we got our fishing corks from the pharmacy, and he also had a good selection of comic books. And I would go over and read all the comic books, and occasionally buy one, but most of the time just would check them all out, and then that would be one of the stops I had. So I have a gas station on the other side. Why I would buy pop out of the pop machine, I don't have a clue, but it was a nickel Coke, and we would do that. PK Restaurant, friend of mine, Paul Kale.
Okay.
His sister was Sandy Hasis.
Uh-huh.
They had a restaurant. They lived upstairs, so we hung around for a while back then. Let me see. Going down the street was Buchanan's. My sister worked at Buchanan's at a very young age. Later, when I got in the Boy Scouts, I can remember doing a coin collecting merit badge, and Steve Buchanan had probably one of the most complete coin collections of anybody it was everything at that time.
Now, I have just a vague recollection of Buchanan's, so that would have been sometime in the 70s and it was a clothing store, correct?
It was a clothing store.
And right across the street from where we're taping right now.
Right across the street from where we were taping down here. On this side of the street, if you went east, there was the bakery, obviously, and there was a bakery, and all their old dough they threw out the back end we used for fish bait a lot. So that was another thing that was there.
So you didn't have to really purchase corks or bait?
Well, we would get cork, bait. No, we would find our own bait. That was not a,
Between the meat market
and you had
bakery?
you had the hardware store. Yeah, it was a very simple rule because we fished with cane poles, and I could, my dad would at the beginning of summer would give me 50 cents for fishing equipment, and you could buy a cane pole, small one for a dime, a big one for 20 cents, and fishing line, hooks for a can for a quarter, and if you didn't have a sinker, stone worked. Then just
Yep.
Yeah, it was pretty simple. Fish with mulberries out of the tree, and learn to fish from the drunks who survived on some of the fish they
Right.
caught. It was really
right.
And it's the other interesting thing too of being young is that with the produce, there were a couple of produce stores on this side of the street. One, and I'm not sure when it was, but Cecil Twaits had one. And even at 9 and 10 years old, like I was at that period of time, the hobos would occasionally come into town and set up camp down by the trestle and send the kids up to sponge vegetables and things from, Twaits knew where we were going with it. And then they would go down and cook stew, mulligan stew, whatever was going to go into it, in these 5-gallon tar buckets, and it was kind of neat.
Did the hobos ever venture towards Spring Street?
Not really. They knew where to go for a handout.
Yeah.
They had their little marks and things that were around. My grandmother would always they'd always be treated all right. And I understand my grandfather was really into it. I never met him, but so yeah, it was just a different time.
Yep.
So
any other favorite stores on?
there
on
was
Spring
Shorty
Street?
Sports Shop. There was a model airplane store. You could go the 5 and Dime store. And there was another variety store on this side of the street, Weisner, and we would go in there all the time. There was you could go businesses just right down the line, and everybody was nice to the kids that went in, and it was
And the stores were all departmentalized, hence calling department stores. But you could get, or your parents could get, whatever they needed on Spring Street.
If you went Christmas shopping, you could do your entire Christmas shopping on Spring Street. The entire family for everything. You could just it was there for everybody at any level.
We're going to come back to Christmas on Spring Street in a little bit, but the one thing that I kind of remember as a kid too, and you highlighted one already, the number of drugstores. Were there a lot of drugstores?
Yeah, there was hand lines on the quarter, and then it was Miller's, where Guarneri's is now, which later turned into Carboviac had it, and then it turned into the pet shop. There was a Rite Aid on the one side of the street. There was Neely's on the other side of the street. The bowling alley was downtown on Spring Street.
Yeah.
Just
like on the east side of the theater of
it was
the Grand Ballroom?
east of the theater, and there were 2 lanes downstairs and 4 lanes. No, there were 4 lanes upstairs. That's where the leagues were held, with the 4 lanes.
So 4 up, 2 down.
4 up, 2 down, and there were hand setters. It was all hand setted done, and it was an interesting place filled with cigar smoke and beer drinking, and it was a wild time.
Now, as a kid, were you able to get into the bowling alley and bowl?
No, I did not bowl in the bowling alley. Okay. My dad bowled in a league for a while, so I did go up there, and I did set pins for a little bit, but it was a little bit above my pay grade. I wasn't quite that big yet, and
Gotcha.
And it was a dangerous.
Sure.
At
those
that
point,
point,
are coming at you hard.
Yeah, and the kids made a lot of money, but they were tough, and
Yeah.
And it was just imagine, because they have the foul lines nowadays, with Well, back in the day, there used to be a guy that sat on one end of along the line of the foul lines, and if somebody went over the line, he'd call a foul on them, and of course that was always protested.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it was just a fun, interesting time.
Let's talk, because I've always heard Friday nights, Saturday nights, this town was just hopping. There was all kinds of activity. This was kind of like the hangout. Is that true? Am I somewhat on the right path there?
The store stayed open till 9. Of course, a different clientele came in on Saturday nights because this was pretty much a lot of bars in town. But when the shopping was going on, yeah, there was a lot of people in town. And the farmers came in from for the big night, the big Saturday night in town, and so yeah, it was busy.
So a lot of shopping, but probably a lot of socializing as well.
There was some socializing, but yeah, they would, they stopped in the store. The store was busy back then, and a lot of traffic. Movie house was filled. We would go, you would, like Francis the Talking Mule was a feature at nighttime, and during the day you'd have your Saturday afternoon features for the kids, and which we went every Saturday.
That was your entertainment Saturdays?
Saturday from 1 to 5, give or take.
2 theaters?
There were 2 theaters. The one, it depended on what was in there. The one was kind of like not the classiest of the 2, and didn't have the newest films, it was a little bit. If there was a high class theater and a not so high class theater, yeah, that's how that broke. One was cheaper than the other. How about that, just for tickets?
And I recall maybe one time you telling me that maybe the cheaper one had some some varmints that might.
Oh
have been.
yeah, well yes, and I shy away from the varmints because people think that's all I know, but yeah, there were a lot of varmints roaming around behind these buildings back in the day. That was not an issue. But yeah, the one theater was the one where you kept your feet up, and then the other one was you didn't have to.
Okay.
That's pretty much how that was.
Gotcha.
So.
Do you remember what it cost you to get in?
Yeah, if I remember right, it was 20 cents to get into the checkers until you were 12, and then it went to 50 cents.
Oh.
Okay, but up until you were 12, it was 20 cents.
How long were you 12?
The manager knew when you turned 12. That's how that went. The other side, it was an oddball number. At one time, like a 9-cent ticket and 11-cent box of popcorn. So you paid 20 cents to get a ticket and buy a box of popcorn.
Gotcha.
That's how that played out. And the popcorn took care of the rats and kept them happy during the movie. I don't know what it was, but yeah, that was.
So going back some time ago, I was doing some research for, I think we were doing a downtown history walk, and I had the ballroom, and came across something called Bank Night.
Thursday night. Thursday night was Bank Night. Yeah, you had to be there. Well, yes, it was. But you had to be 12. You had to have an adult ticket if you wanted to win.
Okay.
That was the first thing. So they had sometimes, like a, if you were there, $50 deal, or they had merchandise from various stores would donate merchandise, and they would have it in there, and there would be a ticket drawing for that, and then Bank Night was had to be present to win.
And so it was like a rolling money.
It didn't grow.
It did not grow.
No, it was just a standard $50. It wasn't going on until the end. It didn't get to a large amount.
And it was after the movie was shown.
Middle.
In the middle.
Intermission. They changed reels.
Ah.
Well, they had
Did
to
you
do
ever
that.
win?
I'm sorry.
Did you ever win?
No, I never won. My sister won a lamp one time.
Yeah,
that was pretty good. That
Yeah.
was a floor lamp, would you believe? Came home walking with a floor lamp. But the movies were packed.
And what a great
Bank night was packed.
Great marketing technique to get people there on a Thursday night.
Yeah, bank night was packed. Saturday night was packed. It was date night. It was everything, and the movies were. And Sunday matinee was packed, and some,
Including the balcony?
Balcony, yes, but the balcony was monitored. That that was monitored. That was that. But yeah, you could go up you went up in the balcony, but yeah.
So the 36 film, the 42 film, they just kind of drove down Spring Street and caught each side of the street and all the business fronts, and there wasn't anything empty.
There was nothing empty. There was nothing empty. No.
It's obviously a contrast to what we see today in 2019.
Yes.
Can you ever imagine that paradigm shift of where we are today going back to what you remember in the 50s?
I can't imagine it happening, but the way it's done now, the way it's set up now, and the way the pattern is all across the country. But I would think that there are strategies that could be investigated to increase some of it. But again, what the people want and what they need, they're using internet. They're hitting the malls if they do that at all. And the little shops reflect the people who live on the streets. The people who are going to live in the apartments, right, and so forth and so on. The stuff that's here caters, a lot to them, and that's just what happens. So, consequently, I think you would take the community and do businesses that would cater, or bring in another group, or bring the people from the parts, the walking distance of downtown, and create things for them. Back during the war, they used to have movies in the park. During the war, and I think that would be a great thing today, just to have things like activities in that park, in that gazebo. You got more kids playing bands and stuff, and you could have any activity to bring people in that area. If you did that, there would be places in town to take care of the needs for those people that had it.
Right.
So those are strategies out of my wheelhouse. I don't know that stuff.
Well, maybe we need to bring back bank night.
We need to put that theater back downtown. That would be a good thing. And again, we need to put the theater in there and have a bank night. And I've always thought to have the Saturday matinees again. But of course, no, the kids don't. They wouldn't do that today.
Too easy to watch on their phone. So you mentioned something about the gazebo, and last Christmas, the St. Mary's FFA sponsored the gazebo lighting and Christmas reflections with John Andreoni.
Yeah.
And you did an awesome job, Mr. A, giving us your reflections on what Christmas was like on Spring Street. So if you could kind of reminisce again with us as to what you remember about Christmas as a child.
The decorations. I remember the fruit and the walnuts and stuff that we sold in the store. Every place you went was Christmas oriented. Montgomery Ward was another store down there that always had Christmas activities. I think I remember that when Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer first came out.
That was at Montgomery Ward.
At Montgomery Ward, they had a party with Santa Claus, and everybody got a little plastic record of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I think that was probably 1948. I'm just, the year sticks with me there.
Uh-huh.
And a bag of fruit, and everything was just. It was just like they catered to the people who walked through the door, and it was family. A lot of it, it was family, and everybody knew everybody. I know later on, some of the places, like there was a pool hall downtown, and we started going into a pool hall when I was a sophomore in high school. Okay, well, so you would think that a pool hall would be a rough place, so forth and so on, and my mother would let me go to the pool hall because the woman who ran it, Margaret Barron at the time, if you said a bad word, if you were unruly, she called your mother, and you were banned from the pool hall, which means you could, like, who does that today?
Right.
'Cause everybody knew how old you were, and everybody, if you were unruly, your parents found out, and then you got that taken away from you. That's just the way it worked. So,
when did Murphy's department store come in? What was that?
You mean the five and dime that were
G.C. Murphy's
that's the north side of the street. Is that the one you're talking?
The one I remember is on the south side, next to the theater.
Yeah, that's really late. The other one was on the north side.
Okay.
Right where the canal part was there at pretty much where the canal goes under the street. It was a building, the building on the corner there, and it was 3 stories. There was the basement along the canal.
So was that part of the glass block building?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay.
It's a glass block. So the bottom basement was, you could look out on the water level, and that's where they had all the kids' toys and stuff and hardware and knives and whatever that you could get. And then it went up level by level to the clothing and so forth. It was a department store for all practical purposes.
And you mentioned before the window shopping, but during Christmas time, I'm certain there was a lot of window shopping of the little kids looking in or going in to see what they wanted to ask Santa Claus.
Well, yeah, we did that. That's true, because there was the sports shops and there was always the catalogs.
Yeah.
Everybody had a Sears, Roebuck, or Monkey Ward catalog in the house. That's where you found out what was there. What
you wanted.
But back in those days,
what you needed.
Back in those days, you got, generally in our family, one thing that you wanted, one major thing that you wanted, and that's how that played out. And then the rest, it was clothing and things and whatever, and other gifts and so forth and so on. So, yeah.
You didn't ask for a Red Ryder BB gun, did you?
No, I did not. I was not allowed to have one. I was 9. I was not allowed to have a BB gun, but I got a shotgun instead. If that makes any sense. My father hunted, and I would learn to hunt, and I had a shotgun. BB guns were dangerous. Shotguns were really dangerous, and you treated them differently.
Yep.
So no, later on when I got older, I did have a pellet gun, but not. First gun was shotgun, which we carried down Spring Street to go down to hunt along the, which again, you
not doing today.
You're not going to do that today. And we were smart enough to. We had single barrel shots. We kept them open, and the police would stop. Open your shotgun. Don't walk down the street with your shotgun. Okay, sorry.
The one thing as we're wrapping up here that we haven't talked about are the existing stores yet today on Spring Street that would have been around when you were a kid. And Hudson's Jewelers has been here forever and ever.
There were a lot of,
it's a pretty neat store.
There were Hudson's. Hudson's was here, and Fennings was on this side over here. But I don't know what I just have to think.
I'm wondering, what was the dress shop?
The dress shop, yes, that was there.
So there's a couple.
There are a couple
that have been the anchors for a long time and are still present here today.
And what's interesting part is they sell quality. I mean, the dress shops and the jewelry store. This is quality stuff, that would be, and it's again, which is probably another. I think would be a great idea in terms of businesses that you find the business that specializes online, but needs a storefront, so they can keep their business open, with their online business, and then have a place for people to come in and, because this would support business. I think it would support business.
Well, there we have our reflections with John Andreoni on growing up on Spring Street, and it's been a wonderful walk down memory lane as he's taken us back to the 50s and what he remembers about being a kid on Spring Street and growing up on the apartment above the confectionery. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with the word association activity and a little correspondence. We got a question for you from somebody, so we will be right back after this.
This segment of Rider Nation Station has been brought to you by Albert Sporting Goods at 121 West Spring Street, serving the St. Mary's community since 1980. Plus One Professionals Real Estate, selling St. Mary's from the corner of Spring and Chestnut since 1982.
Thank you to our fine sponsors for bringing Rider Nation Station Word Association, Plus One Professionals, and Albert Sporting Goods. Please stop in to see these fine folks and stay local the best you can. Tell them thanks for supporting Rider Nation Station. So I'm going to present you with a word or somebody, and you come up with the first thing that pops into your mind, and if you've just got nothing, say pass.
Okay.
All right? And this may be when you're a kid or may not be when you're a kid. Wilson Music Store.
Wilson Music Store. My best buddy was John Wilson's son. So when Wilson's Music Store opened up, later on at time, he also sold sewing machines, but I spent some time in there at Wilson's. Yes, Wilson's Music Store.
Did you play the pianos in there?
I did not play the piano in there, not in Wilson's Music Store.
All right.
We picked up. You picked up piano playing. Some people took the lessons and became trained. The rest of us who didn't have the whatnot, we learned on our own.
Gotcha.
And that's how that progressed. So, but no, there were good pianists in this town. I was not one of them.
Okay.
But that's basically it. That's it. Wilson's Music Store.
Here's the next one.
Okay.
Bass Ackwards.
Bass Ackwards.
Yes, sir.
That's later. That's the bait shop that used to be Hazyker's.
That's new on me.
That's new on you.
Hazyker's.
Hazyker was Bass Ackwards.
Okay.
And the old man Hazyker had a bait shop on the East Bank that's all now torn apart, all torn down. It was right across from where that pond area is down.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bait shop back in there. Went down the hill.
Okay.
But Bass Ackwards that's new stuff. So there was Hazyker's before that.
And it's now the Outdoorsman.
It's now the Outdoorsman, and there's been some other ones in the middle of that.
This one I've been looking forward for your response. Mrs. Shelby.
Mrs. Shelby?
Yep.
Mrs. Shelby. Mrs. Shelby and I taught together for many, 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 many years. And yes, we're great friends. And I like to pull her chain. and that, and that's how that goes.
Yep. And the last one, Smacko.
Smacko was Summerfest on steroids. It was big time out. It was out to the lake, held with the park area, Roscoe and his Little Green Men got their big debut out there.
Okay.
That lasted for a couple of years. Then he did move it into town. But Smacko was a great event. It was a popular event.
And there's some Smacko film captured on the 1961 film that somebody had done of St. Mary's. And
National Guard had displays. Everybody had displays. There was just all sorts of activities, and
I remember there was some water skiing, and I think there was even a tiger or a lion.
There could have been all kinds of stuff.
There, and pretty interesting.
I don't know how many years it was, but and it might even have been a boat race that time. But
so thanks to our sponsors for bringing us the Word Association activity. We've got interactive correspondence. I received a question for you. How many total articles have you written for For the Birds?
I would say probably close to 2,500.
2,500. And when was the first one? What year was the first one that you wrote?
1969.
There you have
So
it.
this is 50 years this October.
Ah,
And that's where I'll do that final book.
yeah.
That we have to get, yes, that'll be the final one.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, there you have it, folks. Please keep your questions, comments coming in for interactive correspondence. You can submit in the comments section or email to writernationstation@gmail.com. Next week's topic, Prof. Kohler. So if you have something in mind that you want to ask Mary Wilson with her reflections on Prof. Kohler, please submit those. Well, we've come to the end of the show. It's our hope at Writer Nation Station the vodcast did entertain, educate, enlighten, and elevate your perspective about St. Mary's, Ohio. We hope a story has been told that augments the development of relationships, old and new, to promote growth for all who do, did, and will call St. Mary's, Ohio home. If you're sitting there amazed by what you just saw, and you're asking yourself, what can I do to help? 4 things. 1, share the Writer Nation Station YouTube channel and Facebook page with as many people that are connected to St. Mary's as you possibly can. Submit show ideas in the comments section to writernationstation@gmail.com. Support our sponsors with business or kind words. Donate to Writer Nation Station at 07396 Lynch Road, St. Mary's, Ohio. Again, I want to thank you, Mr. A, for your time and sharing great stories with us. It was a memorable walk down Spring Street, and hopefully soon Spring Street can return to its vibrancy it once possessed.
It would be nice.
Next Tuesday, we'll be talking with Mary Wilson, reminiscing about longtime educator Prof. Kohler. I hope you think positively about our town, the town we did not inherit from our ancestors, but the town we borrowed from our grandchildren. Peace to you, my fellow St. Marians, always and always. Thanks again, Mr. A.
This episode of Writer Nation Station has been sponsored by American Manufacturing Solutions, your total logistic partner, investing in the St. Mary's community. Albert Sporting Goods at 121 West Spring Street, serving the St. Mary's community since 1980. Plus One Professionals Real Estate, selling St. Mary's from the corner of Spring and Chestnut since 1982. Mr. Bank, helping people achieve financial success and supporter of the Writer Nation and the St. Mary's community. The Evening Leader, chronicling the history of St. Mary's for over 100 years. Like a good neighbor, Lori Yelton, your local State Farm agent, is there.